The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
It's time to attack. With the Attack Style Wrestling Podcast. Here on the Attack Style Wrestling Podcast, you'll find youth and high school coaching tips for coaches, parents, and wrestlers, featuring Gable-trained NCAA champion and Hall of Fame high school coach Darryl Weber. Also featured is a monthly dialogue with legendary wrestling coach Dan Gable. Find out more on AttackStyleWrestling.com. Now, on to the show. And welcome back to the Attack Style Wrestling Podcast, visiting with NCAA champion and Hall of Fame high school coach Darryl Weber as we complete our series on coaching secrets. Now, Coach, have you gone back and tried to find those like Shatner secrets or Takai secrets I was referencing, or are you just letting me go with this wacky stuff?
I'm just letting you run with your thing there. I don't have time to do a whole lot of research, man. I just like getting on and shooting over a topic and rolling with this stuff.
Well, I don't know. The Tribbles episode of Star Trek was on, so the Shatner thing was still fresh in the mind. Even though I'm not a Star Trek guy by any means, and there's no way I'm going to find a way to weave Star Trek or Star Wars into this particular episode. Although it is about cultures, those shows are about cultures. And part 4, the finale of our Secrets series, is building the right culture and arming yourself to coach high school sports. And Darryl, you've got a lot of different theories and questions that you field on this through Attack Style Wrestling and GableTrain.com.
Yeah, I get questions all the time, or, questions and comments just with coaches that are hitting me up and they're frustrated, because kids just aren't, training like they're wanting them to, or they can't get them out, just all the frustrations. And to be honest, and I used to run into this a lot when I was doing clinics. And because people, when you're winning 14 state championships in a row, people think you're not dealing with a whole lot of drama. They just think it's all great. But, I like to tell people stories about some of the things that I have to deal with or had to deal with when I was coaching and how we handled them. Not to get any sympathy from anybody, but to just let them know that, hey, we're dealing with the same things. This is how I've dealt with it in the past. In order to, handle things properly and to continually build a culture and to be realistic. If I hadn't coached with Coach Dresser for 6 years before I took over as head coach, I probably would have second guessed myself a whole lot more, because I had 6 years there where I got to see the kind of things you had to deal with and how we handled them. And so, when I took over and things would go bad, I wasn't, thinking that I was doing things wrong. I just realized that, that's the type of stuff that you got to handle in high school sports, and you have to have a game plan to handle it.
Yeah, and those realities are also a product of the environment. And this is before you got to Christiansburg. I remember Coach Dresser's first year there after he left Grundy. Christiansburg was not like a powerhouse athletic program. I mean, it was a good AA high school. Its sports were, it's in that southwest part of Virginia. Good wrestlers had come through there, but it was not like, it wasn't another powerhouse that a good coach was taking over. That program had to really be built from a competitive AA school to a nationally competitive high school program. And that brings a whole different set of realities. The reality from the kid that goes, okay, well, I was with the old coach, to, oh, crap, I'm with the new coach. I mean, that set of realities right there when building a program is one thing I know that a lot of coaches deal with, is that turnover when you enter a situation where you weren't the guy that brought these guys out for the team in the first place.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a really good point. And, it takes, when I took over, there was people trying to push me out of the way, parents, even, we had a lot of old upperclassmen at the time that were trying, the kids are going to try to take, as much as they can. So I had to deal with, I was an NCAA champ, had been there for 6 years. We were going for our 6th straight state championship that I was part of all of them. And I was still trying to get pushed around. And it was the same program. So, I was dealing with that type of stuff. And you're definitely right. It doesn't take one or two kids, influential kids or parents in a program can wipe out a culture that's been there for decades if you let it. If you get some leaders that start steering the team in the wrong direction, things can go south pretty quick if it isn't handled properly. And same if you get some disgruntled parents and they start working behind the scenes, or you let one on the coaching staff or something like that, and they're more worried about themselves or their own kid than the entire program. Things can go south pretty quick. So but you have to, like you said, you have to set yourself up with some rules and stuff, and how you run your program, so that you kind of keep those things at check and everybody's on the same page. And I'm going to go over that, but I kind of want to start with, this time of year right now. It's middle of December and we're recording this. The beginning of the season can be really, really tough for any coach, high school coach, because you always come into the season with the best scenario playing in your head. You got this guy at this weight class, and everybody's healthy, and you're going to go to this tournament in December, and you're going to we're going to do this and that, and you're all excited, and you come in and there's always something to deal with. Things don't ever go as planned. Typically my experience is, as the season progresses and you get closer to the end, things start to come together and things kind of iron out. But and I've been getting questions and comments from coaches in our members area recently, just asking for advice on how to deal with certain things, and they're going through the same thing. It doesn't matter, if you got a defending state championship team and you're looking to be nationally ranked or this or that, your expectations are in one spot and they can easily drop. And even though you might still be the strong favorite in the state, but you're not doing things at big tournaments, you're frustrated. You put a lot of time and effort into this as a coach. You're just as frustrated as the guy that's just starting a program out and he thinks he's going to get 8 kids out and only gets 6. And, there's always that frustration at the beginning of the year. And my philosophy, I learned real quick, is, you got to continue to do everything you can so that these things don't happen, and you keep everybody involved and you're moving in the right direction. But when it comes down to it, you got to make sure that the negatives don't outweigh the positives, and you don't start, dwelling on those things. And you got to make sure that the kids that are there ready to work, they're getting all of your attention. They're getting everything that they deserve. And typically, if that's your philosophy, you still end up doing good things. Those kids that are in there working are getting after it.
And the key to this is building the right culture. We've got entering that new culture or creating a new culture. There's so many hurdles. And as you said, the coaching realities, when you set rules out in place to kind of, okay, we don't know what the culture is like if you're coming in as a new coach, whether it's a brand new wrestling program, this is your first job, or you're taking a new job, or it's something you just say, you know what, we've got a group of freshmen that's going to come in and change the program. Let's lay some ground rules. Let's lay some rules, whether it be, showing up to practice on time or just general behavioral and type of, general good citizenship type of rules. What are some things that you found that in your career from Don Bosco to Iowa to Christiansburg that really lay the groundwork for building the right culture within a program?
Yeah. So when I took over as head coach, we had a really good team. We had a lot of good individuals, a lot of very involved parents. And, we had some rules at the time that weren't all that popular, but we felt they were the best for our program, for the kids. And so I had some, like parents couldn't come to practice during high school season. And so there was a handful, there was, a couple people that thought that they were going to steamroll me and get that changed, as well as some other stuff, wrestle off scenarios. We had a competitive team and things like that. So, I had one of those parents came up to me, and this kind of leads to how I set the standards for the culture as I progressed as the head coach. And they were kind of this particular parent was kind of in my face about things and just said, well, I don't know what you want with this program, what your goals are with this program, kind of just like, it's kind of thrown in my face. And I'm like, okay, well, you're right. I really do need to sit down and actually define, what my goals are. And first instinct was to sit down and say, all right, we're going to win states this year and we're going to place this high at this tournament, this. And I just started to think about it. And I go, that's not what needs to be done. And I got it. And at the same time, like I said, I was getting heat, and luckily my administration had my back. And I sat down, and for two reasons, I created a 20 plus page document that was my handbook from then on. And basically it set the rules, the standards for our program, which were based on developing the best people. And I knew that if people were following these rules and these standards, and you're trying to get them to live right and get them to show up on practice, and they had to be accountable, and all those things, that's gonna and you're throwing in the best strength training and best technique and the best competition, all that stuff on top of it. That's going to produce the best wrestlers. But you couldn't sacrifice those rules for winning, And I see a lot of coaches base the tough decisions, the hard decisions on winning, and not sitting a kid because they got a big match or something like that, and it always ends up. There's many times when we had a lot of state titles in a row on the line, and I had to boot state championship caliber kids off the team many times, many years. And that was not an easy decision, but it kept the culture alive. So when I first took over, I sat down, number one, to make sure that we were breeding the right mentality, the right culture. And I made this document with all these rules so that everybody knew what was expected coming in. And then I showed that document and this document's in our members area. You can get a copy of this. And I went through it and just kind of set it up so somebody could use it as a template and tweak things and put their own school name and stuff like that in there. And then I also had to have it to cover my back. So I made this document up. I took it to my AD and I said, hey, I want you to look this over. This is what everybody is going to see when they come into the program. And I just want to make sure that you're good with all this because, the AD is my boss during the season like that. So I put that document together and it laid everything out. The school had some criteria in place, just for being tardy and if you get suspended and all that stuff, they had rules. But then I had my own set of rules that I knew, like I said, they were gonna breed the character that I wanted in the wrestlers. They were gonna prepare them for the next step. Even if they didn't wrestle in college, they understood accountability and hard work, and you get what you put into it. So that they went off to college or went off and got a job, they understood how to be successful. And, I've seen it many times. I've seen it firsthand where coaches didn't do that. And they have these all-world athletes in high school or in youth even, and they go off on their own and they can't keep it together. And this, I'm not saying that I had the ultimate recipe. There's always, individuals, but you try to set up a system, a culture that keeps everything together, keeps everybody going on the right path, is in a whole, is building tradition and building character in those kids. And you know what? You're going to lose kids along the way by holding them up to those standards because they're high school kids. They get pretty bullheaded. They get tempted by drugs and other stuff, unfortunately. And when you don't let that stuff slide, you lose them. And you always try to keep your hooks in them, and you always try to bring them back around. You try to do what you can, but sometimes you can only do so much.
Yeah, you'd mentioned your athletic director, and that's another thing that coaches need to understand when they come into a new environment in building that culture. Is you can't just go in and try to change something with it, and you've got to understand, again, that reality that you're in. If you come into a school and you're excited and to get things moving, you've got to have the buy-in of the AD and the administration first. You can't just go in and tell the AD how it's going to be done. You have to work with them. And let's talk about that experience and coming in as an assistant to the head coach and how that relationship with the AD changes.
You're exactly right. And I see that a lot. Like, you got to get them on board. You got to get working together because, I was, like I said, we were super successful. I was very well credentialed coming into, while I was coaching. And there was multiple times I was in that principal's office because people weren't happy with their kids' results, and they were trying to take my head off. And my AD, my administration always had my back, and that was huge. It was huge. If they wouldn't have had my back, then I couldn't have coached as well as I did. If you're having to bend the rules for this kid or that kid because they've got an overbearing parent or they're throwing a fit in the office, that kid is getting a disservice. So yeah, it's very important to come in and, like I said, you got to sit down and you got to think about what you believe in, what you want out of your program, because when you're the head coach, your name's on it. It's not that parent or that, it's your name on it. So those just big decisions that are being made, you better be good with it, and they better be what you deeply believe in. And like I said, and when you're building a culture, you might come in and you see this all the time, even in college. You get a new coach come in to maybe a program that hasn't been doing that good, and they know, it's a smart coach, and they know what it's going to take to turn things around. And it's not going to be holding on to the deadbeats or the kids that don't want to train hard or smoking dope or, doing stuff like that. They come in and they set some standards, and they lose a lot. They lose a lot of kids, and then it takes a little bit of time to build that culture. But that's what you got to do. And in those beginning phases, it's very, very hard because, not everybody's going to be on board. They don't like change. They want it their way. So you gotta, like I said, you gotta sit down, develop a plan that you truly believe in that's going to accomplish what you want. And hopefully that's set on building a lot of character and toughness and independence and accountability and things like that as they go through the program. And then you're educating yourself on the best techniques and wrestling strategies and strength training and getting the best competitions. And that blend, good things are going to happen with that blend.
So when you get the buy-in of the AD, this is the one where we've seen coaches come in and go, my AD won't let me do this. We've got to wait until after basketball practice. We can't get new uniforms. And they immediately create a culture from a coaching standpoint of, animosity and divisiveness. How do you try to explain to coaches that might have questions with their AD who may be a football coach at a power football program that wants to put all that time and all those big guys in the weight room instead of the wrestling mats? I mean, how do you try to massage a relationship with somebody that doesn't really care if there's a successful wrestling program or not? They've got other ideas of what they want with their athletics department.
I think that comes down to, I talk about this a lot, is educating yourself on people skills. And I mean, they're in a place of authority, and that you need to win them over, and you don't do that by steamrolling them. You gotta figure out, maybe they're not on your side right away. You come in guns a-blazing. Human tendency is going to be to not get on board ever. So it might be one of those deals where you got to work extra hard to raise money on your own, with a booster club, with your own booster club, something like that. You just got to do what you can, and hopefully they'll come around and just use your people skills. I mean, there's no way I could give strict advice on how to do this because you're dealing with different individuals with different agendas. But I just think it's very, very important. I mean, you're basically the CEO of the wrestling program if you're the head coach, and you need to develop CEO type skills, not only to deal with ADs and administration properly or as best you can, but also to market yourself to the kids and the parents and how to talk to them and get people excited in the community. I just think it's really important to be reading books and educating yourself on those relationship skills.
When you talk about any coaching situation, building culture, there's going to be that stressful environment. And if it's the kids underperform, you kind of wear that on your sleeve. You feel like that's your responsibility, that, because, coaches, you can't go out there and wrestle the match for them, especially, if you're an NCAA champion. I'm sure the kids wouldn't mind you going out there and wrestling the match for them, but that's just not how the sport works. What are some things that you've experienced in your career that caused high stress moments that you were able to learn from and become a better coach and incorporate into that right culture and being able to arm yourself as a high school coach?
I tell you what, the most stressful thing for me personally as a coach was to lose a wrestler, maybe a kid that's been wrestling since youth, and almost every year there was a kid, one of our guys that was state placer material, and for some reason they didn't come out. And there's all kinds of influences going on. Maybe they were pushed too hard when they were younger. Maybe they are partying too much, doing much. The social scenes got them. There's all different things, but that was always the hardest, the most emotional for me. And I really just tried to evaluate those situations and see how maybe I could have done better to keep that kid involved in the sport. I would evaluate myself. Hey, was I pushing the kid too hard? Could I call him up more often? Could I have created a better environment within my program for him? So I tried to take ownership, and sometimes there's nothing you can do. A lot of times there's nothing you can do, and you're probably doing a good job, but you still, you need to evaluate those situations. And you're exactly right. A good coach, if they lose a big match, they don't put it on the kids. It's their responsibility to bring it out of those kids. And every kid is a little bit different. Some kids are just really tough on their own, and some aren't. And if somebody's not that mentally tough and they're losing big matches that maybe that you feel that they can win, and they're letting the team down or whatever, you don't push that onto them. It's your job to figure out how to pull it out of them. And sometimes it takes longer, and it is frustrating. And I do, nobody's perfect as a coach, but I think that's the mentality that you have to get is, when you run into those tough times, those hard times, you got to deal with them. You got to keep the ball rolling in the right direction, but you got to evaluate the situation, see if there's something better that you could be doing, so that doesn't happen again in the future.
So as we wrap up this episode and wrap up this series about building the right culture, there are still things that new coaches experience in getting kids out, getting them to practice, getting them. You're dealing with parents that may not like their kid wrestling. You've got excuses. I mean, if you miss a practice, there's going to be like, there's the old flat tire story where, 4 people are late to practice because they got a flat tire, and the coach asks them one question: which tire was it? And, it's a way to sniff out. I heard that at the Hall of Fame. I think it was Ron Gray that told me that story, but there's those type of things you deal with, and trying to keep the balance between your ethics and morals about running a program the right way and building the right culture with, again, the realities of the situation, things that you cannot control as a coach. And that's what happens after that wrestler leaves school and leaves the wrestling room.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, there's a lot to balance there. There's no way we could get on here and give somebody a black and white answer to all these tough situations. But the biggest thing, after a lot of the questions I see come into my members area, is the biggest thing I want to just let coaches know out there that maybe this time of year are just don't think they've got what it takes. The wheels are falling off. Hey, I've been there. You just got to keep plugging along, doing your best, and just trying to make the best individual. The kids that are in that program, you try to make them the best people that you can make them, and that'll make the best wrestlers as well.
And tell everybody how they can get a hold of this members area on attackstylewrestling.com and Gable Train.
That's in Gable Train. On GableTrain.com, we have you can check out the access. And if you signed up for our email list, if you go to Attack Style Wrestling, you can sign up on there for the email list, and we give out all kinds of free information. And there's always offers to get products and get in on our members area as well with special discounts and whatnot.
And this podcast also one of those free items that AttackStyleWrestling.com provides. So that'll wrap up our Secrets series. We've got another series coming down the line, and if you haven't checked out the previous episodes of the series, go back. We've got serialized episodes now, Darryl. We're trotting these out in a serial format because I guess that serial format seems to resonate with people now. So you boom, boom, boom. You listen to them on your commutes. You subscribe on iTunes. You leave a rating and review, and you sign up at AttackStyleWrestling.com.
Show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.